Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm neither light of touch nor groundbreaking, I'm afraid, but for those of you that don't know me, I've recently taken on the role as Chief Executive of the Chartered Institute of Logistics and Transport after 37 years in third party and in manufacturing. So I'm a logistics operator by background, and I've either moved to the dark side or the light side, or I'm on a path of enlightenment, depending on which way you look at it. But I think the move caused some surprise, certainly with my colleagues. I'm recently in there, so some of the stuff I'll talk about I know in depth. A lot of it I know very little about. But I do want to end up with a theme that I feel strongly about, and it would be interesting to see your views on that as we go through the day. For those of you that don't know, we're about to come up to our centenary year. So the Institute was founded in 1919, essentially after the First World War, with the founding of the Institute of Transport, which picked up its royal charter during the 1920s. We're a very broad church. We encompass people in academia, planning, operational execution and improvement, and we go from maritime through aviation, logistics, retail, manufacturing, transport, warehousing, etc. We do have a charter. Our charter is to advance the art and science of logistics and transport, and we do that a number of ways. We support leading edge thinking, we share best practice through our networks, through our members, and through education, and we also have a role about raising the profile of the profession, which I'll come back to later. The breadth of membership that we have is reflected in our professional sectors, the forums, and also across our wider organisation, CILT International. We currently have 8 professional sectors. So when people join us, they elect, for example, to go into supply chain or into transport planning. Transport planning for us is actually the guys that design the roads, the roundabouts, and tend to work in the engineering sectors. And that's a large part of our organisation. About 3,000 members actually sit within that category. We also include the Institute of Operations Management. We support the Humanitarian Logistics Association. We have Aspire, who are represented here today, which is our charity. We have the Novus Trust, which works with universities. And we also have an organisation called PTRC. So we have a lot of complexity. But essentially as an organisation, we're about providing members with opportunities to network, share best practice, come together and debate issues, whatever discipline and whatever mode they're in. And then as part of CILT International, we have more than 33,000 people worldwide, ranging from Australia, New Zealand, up into China, Hong Kong, and through to North America. Now, despite all that, and despite what I have responsibility for, I get one question asked more than anything else, and that is, how are you finding life in the Institute world? And the answer is, it's very different. There's much more complexity. I thought I was taking on the role to run Chartered Institute of Logistics and Transport. I didn't realise that we had all these other things, and as each day goes by, I find something else popping out of the woodwork. Pace is much slower. You kind of expect that, and people say, well, in the Institute world, it is a bit slower. It's not slow in terms of activity. I don't think I've ever been so busy in my life, but it is slow in delivering change. And that's due to the fact that our 18,500 members are all shareholders, and by God, they all express views. So when you make a comment, I tend to miss out 5%, and they get very vocal. Or if I express an opinion that we ought to do something, or I want to make a change, it's like waging World War III at times. So it's interesting. The other thing I've learned, and again, this is pertinent for later on, I was a member from the 1980s, and I was inactive. I worked outside the UK. I didn't want to visit another warehouse. And essentially all that happened was I got 12 magazines coming through the door. They stopped the diary. They gave me a wall chart in this digital age. And I did kind of question the value. But one of the things that I found moving in there is that within our membership, we have a lot of people who find the organisation very valuable. And the reason for that is they get out what they put in. Okay, if you do nothing, you get the magazines. But if you really use the Institute, people get substantial value. That's both as individuals and also corporate members. The other thing that I've also discovered is I'm not very good at PR. 3PL language and peppering conversations with shit and bollocks and all the other bits and pieces doesn't go down particularly well, especially when you're sitting in front of a parliamentary under a secretary and they're trying to minute what you've said. It's quite an interesting one. So, what's the Institute's vision? Well, the first thing is why people join an institute like ours, a member organisation. It's about connection, it's about protection, it's about recognition and personal growth. And connection in the sense that they want to be part of an organisation and share experiences with like-minded people, share best practice and to network. Protection's about having a voice for professionals within the industry. Recognition is about the post-nominals and about being seen as professionals within the industry. And personal growth is through the education and the learning that we provide. But one of the things I've found is that's quite difficult to do given the breadth of membership. So how do you satisfy someone who's interested in planning around cycle lanes in London as opposed to an SMB running trucks, as opposed to a large 3PL or a retailer or a global organisation or national? That's difficult. How do you do it when we've got an age range that goes from students, so 18, and we've got members, believe it or not, in their 90s? Not particularly active, but they are quite vocal. And how do we do it when we've got people at various career stages, from those that are just starting out through the chief execs of some of the largest logistics and transport organisations in the country? So how do we make sure that we provide value to members? Well, my objective, and the process that we're going through at the moment, is really about a number of things. It's about making us more relevant. So it's making us relevant, recognising that diversity, and it's about being flexible. We tend to issue in our magazine, and it's a cross between a kind of magazine and a journal. You know, unless you're interested in cycling Carmarthen, you're not going to read it. Jobs tend to start at around 60,000 up, so if you're a student and you're looking at the magazine, that piece of it's not relevant. So we've got a piece that says, how do we provide communication across that age range and across the career stages? How do we get more vibrant? We're kind of a bit fuddy-duddy in some ways, but how do we get that vibrancy and energy? How do we become more visible? We're not a lobbying organisation. We do express views on policy. We do it in a very British way, so we will issue an opinion on Heathrow's third runway along the lines of, if it's okay with you. But our policy committees are very learned, and so I think there's an opportunity for us to express and play a greater role in policy. We also need to become more forward-thinking. I think the Institute's kind of going forwards from the past rather than backwards from the future. So one of the things we're trying to do at the moment is set a vision and then work out what we need to do to drive forward. And again, this point about being more value-adding. But despite the diversity and whatever else, the other thing we have to take into account is the world that we operate in is always changing. There are a raft of things that are taking place that are personal, they're external, they're internal, they're within organisations, they impact us as individuals. Those things are moving faster, but there seem to be some common themes. Certainly when I was in 3PL, actually they apply now. Customers, in whatever form, want lower costs, they want greater service levels, they want lower environmental impact, they want greater compliance. And the thing that we're seeing now, particularly with the rise of the digital world, is greater agility and flexibility. So the challenges, although they're recurring, are many, and the pace is increasing. Well, what are the challenges that we come across for the industry? Well, in reality, for individuals, they're the ones that are right in front of you at a particular moment in time. I appreciate that. But there are a number of things that I've come across over the last 3 months, so whether I'm dealing with the military, whether I'm dealing with private sector, public sector. There's an issue around convergence versus divergence. So convergence in the sense that we're seeing supply chains become much more integrated than we have done in the past. We're seeing convergence in areas such as urbanisation. So I think the forecast is that by 2050, something close to 90% of the UK population will be living in urban areas. The other thing, obviously, is we're seeing the growth in omni-channel and the bringing together of the consumer experience. And we're also seeing developments of things like the Chinese Belt and Road, which will link 65 countries by road and rail, and will also link the world globally in terms of maritime activity. Massive investment project going on at the moment. But we're also seeing divergence. So whilst we're seeing the growth in urbanization, we have the government policy of devolution associated with urban areas, and therefore one could see transport requirements and planning within cities being different, and that will impact. And the other thing is we are seeing the rise and split, if you like, of what one can call the difference between the digital natives and the digital immigrants. Those of you that are under 35 typically are classified as a digital immigrant. Surprisingly, I don't fit in that category. Digital natives are under 35. Those of us that are over, we tend to still talk about going online, and I still say to my wife, I'll go on the computer and have a look at that. I'm not connected all the time. We're also seeing disruptive technologies, so the likes of Uber. We're seeing challenges over investment versus contract life cycles. That's a big issue, for example, in the rail industry. If you've got a government franchise of 7 to 10 years, how do you invest in assets that typically have a life of 25 years or more? Despite all those, for me, for the Institute, labour and skill shortages are probably our top priority. And I think within operations, regardless of all the changes in technology and things, people still remain this industry's greatest asset. Now, I mentioned earlier about raising the profile, raising awareness of the industry. One of the things about this industry is when you talk to people, they say, well, I never planned to get into logistics, I sort of fell into it, but now I'm there, I actually quite like it. It disappears from the school agenda. Children in their 7s, 8s, 9s play with cars, trains, planes, automobiles, then it disappears off the curriculum. Supply chain holds UK PLC together, but it's lost, it's not in the teaching. It is an organisation, we are an industry that should be attractive. There's massive variety of roles in what we do. The challenges are great. The opportunities are significant. But the reality is that for most people, it's something that people aren't aware of. We do have a negative image. I was at a meeting recently and someone was talking about the negative perception about drivers. And the guy said, well, actually, it's not a negative perception. It's a positive perception. It is a real perception that driving these days, LGV, is not what it was. It's not an attractive business to move into. The other thing is we don't help ourselves as an industry. Skills are not transferable. So you can have an LGV license. You could have worked for DHL for 10 years. You go to my former employer, Norbert Doncherson, and the first thing they'll do is send you out with a driver assessor, and then they'll retrain you. And if you go to John Lewis, they'll send you out with a driver assessor. And if you have a fork truck license and you move from one organisation to another, they'll want you to hold their own license. So our skill sets are not transferable. What I'm also seeing is a substantial amount of initiatives that are being done, whether by ourselves, by the trade associations, by the employers. And I kind of take a view that these are a bit like tuppenny rockets. They're all very honourable and we're all trying to do our bit. But the net impact is they fizz for a little while and then they disappear. We need a much more joined up approach. If we're going to tackle things like awareness in schools, if we're going to support apprentices, if we're going to support apprentice schemes, further education, if we're going to make training accessible, if we're going to remove obstacles, if we're going to address future skill needs. I mean, one of the interesting things when we talk about autonomous vehicles is on the one hand we talk about the driver shortage and then we talk about the fact that we're launching autonomous vehicles. The skill shortage is likely to be the people that are capable of operating the autonomous vehicles and maintaining them. We have the building blocks in place. We have things like Think Logistics, Novus Trust, skills academies, various initiatives. But if we really want to make a difference, we need an industry-led approach. I'm meeting next month with RHA, FTA, Society of Engineers, UKWA, Think Logistics and Novus Trust, Beverly Bell, who many of you will know, is going to chair that. And we're going to sit down and say, how do we work together to address these issues? Because in working together is strength. Doing it on our own, I think, leads us to less impact. And it's a bit like the membership issue within CILT. You get out what you put in. So my request to all of you is please support us as we move through this process. Your input will be vital. Thank you very much.